So now we'll go through the FACEIT and ACEIT sides separately, each with an acronym to define the steps and help recall the components. And then we'll go through 2 case examples. Often after a brain injury, the ability to slow down, manage your emotions, feelings, and intent, and plan a response can be major challenges. Impulsivity is very common. Triggers in the environment or particular topics can cause immediate overreactions. The FACEIT-ACEIT model provides a framework to define and address each of these steps listed here. The facing your feelings, and the acronym for FACEIT, for the FACEIT side is FACE. The face your feelings, that involves the willingness to explore one's reactions. You have to be open to accepting that you may not have responded well or in the best way, and you have to have the intent or interest in working to improve. The A is for analyze your warning signs and pitfalls. So what contexts or timing or environments tend to put you on edge? And create, C is for create a plan for emotional self-regulation. Plan to change your reaction or to prevent a problem. Use some sort of strategy to work around it or prevent a problem. And then the E is for evaluate. Always a good idea to go back and see. So once I've enacted my plan, I would want to evaluate, reflect back. Did it work? Did I react appropriately? How could I continue to improve in the future? When working to improve emotional self-regulation, we're asking our patients to look closely at their reactions and responses. In our health system and in our clinic, we embrace a mindfulness model based on the principles from the Conscious Leadership Group and the authors of the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership text up in the upper right-hand corner. The same model, but a simplified version, fits well and has been incorporated into the FACEIT side of the FACEIT-ACEIT model. It provides a visual anchor. If you look at the rectangle image that's across the bottom of the screen, the visual anchor is a line. And we use that visual anchor to increase your awareness of your current beliefs, behaviors, and statements. So we ask ourselves and our patients to think, in this moment or in this problem situation, am I responding from above the line or reacting from below the line? If I'm responding from above the line, that is the words listed there: open, curious, learning, so willing to learn and trust in a person, a situation, or in a process. If you react or respond from above the line, that's reacting from a creative state. And below the line, that's a closed state, defensive, committed to being right, and acting out of fear. And that's a more reactive state. One major premise of the line model is that there's not a lot of gray area. So you're either above the line or below, but you can vacillate from above to below the line or actively and consciously shift from below the line to above, depending on how you choose to respond to a stimulus or to a trigger. And we'll provide more information at the end of the presentation, but we wanted to note that Dr. Sheldon Herring, the director of our program, will be elaborating on this concept in the next NeuronUP Academy presentation next month called The Conscious Therapist. The Conscious Leadership Model was originally created for leaders of teams in the corporate world, but it makes sense to apply to a person as a leader within their family or any group that they're in, a therapist as a leader in planning treatment with their patient, or just me as a leader over myself and my own decisions or reactions in the world. Emotional self-regulation as related to problem solving involves figuring out where and why emotional breakdowns occur and creating a plan to prevent or work around the problems. It takes mindfulness and metacognition, thinking about your own thinking, and to be able to self-reflect on your reactions and overreaction. The FACEIT materials help us to be able to work with our patients to define the contexts in which the person functions best. So that might be different environments that they function best, and then hot topics to be aware of that might lead them to a heightened emotional reaction. The materials help us be able to define and be aware of pitfalls which might get in the way, and those might be personal pitfalls that are just the ways that we are built and things in our personality that could get in the way or impede effective problem solving. So for example, has the person always struggled to keep organized? Do they wait to the last minute? Do they struggle with self-confidence? And those might be things that, regardless of whether you've had a brain injury, you may have some things that would get in the way of effective problem solving. But if a person who is working on recovering through a brain injury or stroke may have additional pitfalls to be aware of, which would be brain injury related pitfalls, anything that might get in the way, following through, attention, being able to generate multiple solutions to a problem, anything like that. The FACEIT materials also help a patient to be able to recognize warning signs. So if they are, if they can recognize things about their body, physical warning signs or behavioral warning signs, cognitive or emotional warning signs, and if they can recognize them, that they would be able to avoid an overreaction. So for example, if they notice that their heart beats fast when they have they're starting to step into a situation where they might overreact, they start feeling fidgety, they may furrow their brow, or they're feeling anxious. If they can recognize that, then they may be able to exit the situation, take a deep breath, employ positive self-talk, and avoid that emotional self-regulation breakdown. And this will show up in case examples later in the hour. Negative thinking patterns can lead to negative emotional reactions and impede adjustment after brain injury. Some examples we hear: I can never do anything right, I'm a failure, if I ask for help, I'm not smart enough to do it, if I don't get 100% correct, it's not worth trying. There are any of these negative reels that play in our minds. Another similar negative thinking pattern are cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions are ways that our mind convinces us of something that is not really true. These maladaptive thought patterns are usually used to reinforce negative thinking. There's several main patterns, and we listed 2 common ones here. Each can be reframed to a more rational, realistic perspective. Here are some examples of positive self-statements to battle negative self-talk. If a person becomes aware of their negative thinking habits, then he or she can recognize when it's happening and eventually replace it with a more realistic self-talk. Understanding the negative self-talk and cognitive distortions gives us insight into the internal emotional struggles that our patients may be facing. It takes a lot of trust and a strong therapeutic relationship. These concepts are addressed within the FACEIT to ACEIT problem-solving model, and tools are referenced and provided. So that was a very brief intro to the FACEIT side of the model, and now we'll go on to an explanation of the ACEIT side. Often after a brain injury, the ability to define a problem and identify multiple potential solutions, examining pros and cons, selecting the most effective solution, and following through can be major challenges. The FACEIT ACEIT model provides a framework to address each of these steps. An acronym here on the ACEIT side is ABCDE as you go through the steps of the ACEIT side. Defining a problem is sometimes straightforward and sometimes is not. So something to consider: there are 2 broad types of problems. The first type of problem is when your original plan is blocked and there's no solution readily apparent. So something like when you lost your keys and you're locked out of the house. Your car ran out of gas on the highway. You realize you missed an important appointment. Many problem-solving workbook scenarios address this type of problem. But there's a whole other set of problems or types of problems, and that's when there's interpersonal conflicts, power struggles, differing opinions. And these are more difficult to define. So some examples of these would be what you want to do versus what you can or should do. So for example, I want to start driving, but I'm not sure if I'm ready. What you want versus what someone else wants. My mom says I can't go back to school. My therapist says I can't go back to work. For another example, conflict between 2 of your own goals. I need to work to support my family, but I also need to complete my therapy. Again, getting into problem solving requires digging deep and to make a real difference in the lives for our patients. We need to be willing to go there for our patients, the vulnerable and sometimes messy topics and places. The remaining steps of the ACEIT side are brainstorming multiple solutions on your own and with others, considering the pros and cons, barriers, analyze the potential solutions that the person came up with, pick the best solution, stick with it, follow through, and then decide, did it work? So this is back to that evaluate step. Again, this last step is often forgotten, but it is a very powerful tool. It ensures self-reflection, it encourages self-awareness, and supports generalization. So when the person learns from the process.
So after the team, so at the beginning, we're going to have the team develop a plan for addressing problem solving. The team needs to define the patient's problem solving skills. So looking at both the emotional self-regulation and also the patient's clear thinking skills. And we do this through the use of standardized, informal, and also functional assessments. So a lot of times from multiple disciplines, from the PT or from caregivers, a lot of people often say, well, I'm not a part of that. But truthfully, all team members play a role in this assessment piece. Even the receptionist at the front desk, taking observation of how did the patient get to this new place? Did they call 4 times? Did, lots of different ways that can be observed in terms of their behavior, and also information from that particular patient and the caregivers by providing feedback and observations. So we really want to look at the patient's style and their responsiveness to feedback. And all these examples and observations can be clinical indicators for assessment. We look at this as an interdisciplinary approach, as I said. So all team members are considered coaches and sometimes even counselors if we're digging deep into the patient's problems in life and style. If a patient has more involved emotional self-regulation needs, the psychologist will do usually the model introduction and offer patient-specific strategies, providing support to the team as well. It's important to remember that we all relate to people differently too, so when we work on a team, sometimes we have to run with whomever can build that trusting relationship the fastest. Certain personalities jive well with others, and sometimes there's relatable experiences or interests that the therapist and the patient might just kind of jive on real quickly. The next step of the team process is determining the level of instruction, which is driven by the patient need. So what I mean by that is looking at their problem-solving severity. So how much support do they need from the FACEIT side, and how much support or rehabilitation do they need from the ACEIT side. So to assess the severity of the ACEIT side, there's a tool in the FACEIT ACEIT manual we call RACS, the Rating of ACEIT Competency System, and then the team uses TIPS, the Tiered Intervention Planning System, to select the best method of instruction. So the levels of different instruction, there are worksheets included in the manual, which are step-by-step, menus that the patients can work through, and then even just something as simple as these playing cards that you can see on the slide. Often Dr. Herring, he leaves his in his pocket, and so when he's faced with a problem, he'll pull that out, and it reminds him, just a brief reminder of facing his style or how he's approaching the problem, facing his feelings in order to be able to clearly think through the problem. And for some, this simple prompt of the wallet-sized playing card is enough to bring more deliberate and systematic options forward, while others may require more detailed worksheets before they internalize a more structured and systematic approach when problems are encountered. So here, this slide demonstrates the depth of resources or tools included in the model. The core tools on the left are considered part of instruction for all patients with problem-solving model, and the specialized tools on the right are used based on the patient need. The non-counselor you see there under the specialized tool refers to non-psychology professionals. And next, Amanda is going to briefly talk about 2 case applications which highlight different problem-solving profiles.